Death is final. When the brain dies, the person is gone. Brain death is the legal, medical, and philosophical finish line. The biological machinery that generated consciousness shuts down permanently. No medical intervention has ever brought a brain-dead organism back. Death is the one absolute certainty. Then in 2022, researchers at Yale published results from OrganX, a system that restored cellular function in the brains and organs of pigs a full hour after the animals had died. The technology pumps a synthetic solution through the circulatory system that delivers oxygen, nutrients, and protective chemicals to dead tissue. Cells that had been clinically dead began metabolizing again. Organs started contracting. Brain cells showed electrical activity. Not life as we know it, but cellular function where there was supposed to be none. The fallacy is the black or white fallacy, also called false dichotomy. We frame death as a binary toggle, alive or dead, on or off. But biology does not work in binary. Death is a process, not a moment. Cells die at different rates. Some organs shut down minutes after the heart stops. Others survive for hours. We believe death is instant and absolute because that is how we experience it. A person is there, then they are not. Medical professionals must draw a clear legal line. But that legal line is a practical necessity, not a biological law. The cells do not know about the death certificate. OrganX does not mean immortality. It does not restore consciousness or bring back a person. But it proves that the cellular destruction we assumed was immediate and total is actually gradual and partially reversible. That changes everything about organ preservation, transplant medicine, and resuscitation science. Death is not a wall. It is a gradient, and we just learned how to push further along it. Mind reading is impossible. Your thoughts are the last private frontier. Nobody can reach inside your skull and see what you are thinking. Mental privacy is absolute, guaranteed by the physical barrier of bone and the incomprehensible complexity of 100 billion neurons firing. This is not just a belief. It feels like a law of nature. Then a team at Osaka University trained an AI system to watch fMRI brain scans and reconstruct the images a person was looking at or imagining. Not vague categories like, the person is thinking about a dog. Actual, recognizable visual reconstructions. The AI learned to map specific blood flow patterns in the visual cortex to specific image features, then used a diffusion model to generate pictures that match what the subject was seeing in their mind. The fallacy is the argument from complexity. Because the brain is the most complex object we know of, we assume its internal states must be permanently unreadable. Complexity does not equal opacity. Weather is complex too, but we forecast it. The human genome has 3 billion base pairs, and we sequenced it. Complexity is a challenge, not a wall. People cling to this belief because mental privacy feels fundamental to identity. If someone can read your thoughts, what is left that is truly yours? The belief is less about physics and more about existential comfort. We need our minds to be private, so we declare it impossible. But fMRI technology does not lie. When specific brain regions activate in consistent patterns, those patterns are readable. The current technology requires a person to sit still inside a massive scanner, and it works best with visual imagery. Nobody is reading your thoughts on the subway, but the principle has been proven. Thoughts produce measurable physical signals. Measurable signals can be decoded. The wall between mind and machine has its first cracks. Telepathy is impossible. Communicating directly from brain to brain without speaking, typing, or gesturing is supernatural nonsense. Telepathy is for psychics, science fiction, and people who believe in crystals. The brain is a biological organ sealed inside a skull. Its electrical signals do not broadcast. No one can hear your thoughts because your thoughts do not leave your head. Then, in 2024, a man named Noland Arbor, paralyzed from the shoulders down, played video games, browsed the internet, and moved a computer cursor using a Neuralink brain implant that translates his neural activity directly into digital commands. No movement, no speech, pure thought to machine interface. Brain-to-brain communication experiments at the University of Washington demonstrated that one person can send a binary signal, essentially a thought, to another person's brain via transcranial magnetic stimulation, causing the receiver to involuntarily press a button. The fallacy is the supernatural association fallacy. Because telepathy has historically been associated with pseudoscience, any technology that resembles it gets dismissed by association. The word telepathy carries so much baggage that describing brain-computer interfaces as telepathic feels illegitimate, even when the function is identical. People refuse to believe in telepathy because every previous claim was fraudulent. Every psychic was debunked. Every mind reader was a cold reader. That history creates a powerful bias against any technology that sounds similar. But past fraud does not make future technology impossible. It just means the mechanism was wrong, not the goal. Brain-computer interfaces do not read minds through mystical energy. They read electrical patterns through electrodes. The principle is closer to a microphone than to magic. A microphone translates air vibrations into electrical signals. A neural interface translates brain vibrations into digital signals. Same concept, different medium. Telepathy was never impossible. It was just poorly named and badly attempted. The technology caught up to the aspiration. Thought to action is here. Thought to thought is next. Severed spines are permanent. Sever the spinal cord, and the body below goes silent forever. This has been medical gospel for centuries. The spinal cord is the information highway between brain and body, and when it is cut, the signals stop. Paralysis is permanent. No surgery, no therapy, no drug can reconnect those severed nerve fibers. Then neuroscientists and engineers built brain-computer interfaces that bypass the damaged spinal cord. In 2023, researchers in Switzerland implanted a device that reads movement intentions from the motor cortex and transmits them wirelessly to a spinal stimulator below the injury. A man paralyzed from the waist down stood up and walked using his own thoughts. His actual legs, driven by his brain, with technology bridging the gap. The fallacy is the single solution fallacy. We assume the only way to fix a severed spine is to physically reconnect nerves. Since that is currently impossible, we declare the problem unsolvable. But reconnection is only one approach. Bypassing is another. The signal does not care how it gets from brain to legs. It just needs a path. People believe spinal injuries are permanent because historically they have been. Every paralyzed person stayed paralyzed. But history is not a prediction engine. It is a record of what happened before the next breakthrough. The technology is still early. Walking is slow and requires extensive calibration. But the principle of reading brain signals and delivering them past the injury has been proven in humans. The spinal cord was never the only road between brain and body. It was just the only one biology built. Now we are building others. The highway was down, so we routed around it. Your DNA is set in stone. You are born with your DNA, and you die with it unchanged. Your genetic code is the blueprint that built you, and once construction is complete, the blueprint cannot be edited. Genetic diseases are life sentences. This belief held for decades until CRISPR changed everything. In 2020, doctors injected CRISPR gene editing tools directly into the eyes of patients with Leber congenital amaurosis, a genetic form of blindness. The treatment edits the faulty gene inside living cells, correcting the mutation that causes disease. In 2023, the FDA approved Casgevy, a CRISPR therapy for sickle cell disease, marking the first approved gene editing treatment in history. The fallacy is the static model fallacy, assuming that because DNA is described as a code or blueprint, it must be as fixed as those metaphors imply. But DNA is chemistry, not architecture. Chemical structures can be cut, modified, and reassembled with the right molecular tools. People believe DNA is unchangeable because for most of human history, it was. We could read the genome, but not write to it. The analogy to a book of life reinforced the idea of permanence. But CRISPR is a molecular word processor. It uses a guide RNA to locate a specific DNA sequence and a Cas9 protein to cut it precisely. Scientists can then delete, replace, or insert genetic material at that exact location. In vivo treatments edit genes inside the living patient without removing cells. Genetic diseases that were once permanent can now potentially be corrected after birth. Sickle cell patients who received Casgevy have gone years without pain crises. The permanent ink was never permanent. It was just ink nobody had invented an eraser for. Now the eraser exists, and the book of life has become a living document. The sun is untouchable. You will vaporize if you get anywhere near the sun. Everyone knows that. It is the hottest object in our solar system, a raging ball of plasma at 27 million degrees at its core. Getting close means instant death. End of story. Except NASA did not get that memo. In 2018, the Parker Solar Probe launched directly toward the sun, and in 2021, it flew through the solar corona itself. Not near it, through it. At speeds exceeding 400,000 miles per hour, it became the fastest object humans have ever built. The shield keeping it alive is a 4.5-inch carbon composite heat shield that keeps instruments at room temperature while the outside face hits 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. The fallacy at work here is the appeal to intuition. We assume that because something sounds obviously deadly, no engineering solution could possibly exist. Our brains take a legitimate danger and promote it to an absolute impossibility. We confuse dangerous with impossible, and those are two very different words. The reason this belief sticks is simple. The sun is the most powerful thing we can see. Every human culture has built myths around it being untouchable, divine, beyond our reach. That mythology baked itself into our assumptions about physics. But physics does not care about mythology. It cares about thermal conductivity, ablation rates, and radiation shielding. The Parker probe did not cheat the laws of nature. It used them. Carbon composite does not conduct heat efficiently. The probe hides behind its shield the same way you hide behind an umbrella in a rainstorm. You do not need to stop the rain, you just need to redirect it. So the next time someone tells you something is untouchable, ask them one question. Untouchable by what? Because the answer usually is not physics, it is imagination. You can't unboil an egg. Crack an egg, boil it, and it is done. The proteins have tangled into a solid white mass, and there is no going back. This is one of those facts that feels so obviously true that nobody even questions it. Cooking is a one-way street. Entropy wins. The egg is permanent. Until 2015, when chemists at the University of California, Irvine built a machine that literally unboiled egg whites. They used a vortex fluidic device, a machine that spins liquid at incredibly high speeds, generating mechanical stress that physically pulls apart the tangled protein structures. The egg whites went from cooked, solid white back to clear liquid. Not a trick, not a metaphor, an actual reversal of the cooking process at the molecular level. The fallacy here is the appeal to irreversibility, a specific flavor of the appeal to nature. We assume that because natural processes appear to move in one direction, they must be permanently locked in that direction. Entropy increases in closed systems, sure, but an egg in a lab is not a closed system. You can add energy and mechanical force to push the process backward. People believe this because cooking is the most universal chemistry experiment on Earth. Every human who has ever boiled an egg has watched proteins denature in real time. When you see something happen 1,000 times with no reversal, your brain quietly files it under permanent. That is called inductive reasoning, and it is powerful but not infallible. The real significance of this technology goes way beyond breakfast. Tangled proteins are central to diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's. The ability to untangle them cheaply and quickly could slash pharmaceutical production costs by billions. So the cooked egg was never really permanent. We just had not built the right machine yet. Permanence is often just a patience problem. Seeing through solid walls belongs in comic books, right next to capes and secret identities. It is physically impossible. Visible light cannot penetrate concrete. Your eyes are useless against a brick wall. Case closed. Seeing through walls is fiction. Seeing through solid walls belongs in comic books, right next to capes and secret identities. It is physically impossible. Visible light cannot penetrate concrete. Your eyes are useless against a brick wall. Case closed. Then researchers at MIT built a system called RF-POSE that uses ordinary Wi-Fi signals to see human bodies moving through solid walls, not blurry blobs. Detailed stick figure representations showing posture, gait, and individual limb movement in real time. The system works because Wi-Fi signals, unlike visible light, pass through most building materials. They bounce off the water in human bodies and return with enough data for a neural network to reconstruct full body poses. The device does not need cameras, infrared, or any special sensors. It uses signals that are already flooding through your home right now. The fallacy here is the anchoring bias combined with a false equivalence. We anchor seeing to visible light and assume that if light cannot pass through a wall, then seeing through it is impossible. But seeing just means extracting spatial information about what is on the other side. Light is only one way to do that. We believe this because our entire experience of vision is optical. Eyes detect photons. Walls block photons. Therefore, walls block vision. The logic feels airtight because we never question the first premise, that vision requires light. Radar operators figured this out decades ago. Sonar operators figured it out even earlier. Bats figured it out millions of years before humans existed. The electromagnetic spectrum is enormous, and visible light is a tiny sliver of it. Wi-Fi operates at 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, frequencies that treat drywall like open air. Your walls were never really walls. Not to the right frequency. We just kept looking with the wrong part of the spectrum. You can't pull water from nowhere. You cannot create water out of thin air. A desert is dry because there is no water. If stranded in the Sahara, You need an oasis or carry your own supply. The air in a desert has nothing to offer. Except it does. Even the driest air on Earth contains water vapor. The Sahara at its most brutal still holds about 25% relative humidity at night. In 2017, researchers at MIT and UC Berkeley built a device using metal organic frameworks, or MOFs, that harvest drinkable water directly from desert air using only sunlight. The device pulls moisture from the air at night when humidity rises, traps it in the MOF crystals, then releases it as liquid water when the sun heats the material during the day. The fallacy is the zero-sum fallacy. We assume that because a desert looks dry, the air must contain zero usable water. In reality, the atmosphere holds roughly 12,900 cubic kilometers of water at any given time. That is more than all the rivers on Earth combined. Deserts are not waterless. They are just water poor. This belief persists because our senses are terrible humidity detectors. We feel heat and see sand, but do not feel the invisible water molecules suspended in every breath we take. Our perception of dry is relative to our comfort, not to absolute molecular content. Companies are now building solar-powered water harvesters for communities in arid regions that lack groundwater access. The machine does not violate physics. It just does what a cold glass does on a summer day. It condenses water from air. The desert was never truly dry. We just lacked the right sponge. Lightning is uncontrollable. Lightning is the ultimate symbol of chaos. It strikes wherever it wants, whenever it wants, with no warning and no negotiation. You cannot predict its exact path or aim it. Humanity has spent millennia watching it destroy things and accepting that we are powerless against it. Then in 2023, scientists from the University of Geneva pointed a high-powered laser into the sky above a Swiss mountain and physically guided a lightning bolt along the laser beam path. On Mount Santis, near a telecommunications tower that gets struck about 100 times per year, they proved that a sufficiently powerful laser can create a channel of ionized air that lightning will preferentially follow. They did not just attract lightning, they steered it. The fallacy is the appeal to tradition. For thousands of years, lightning has been the go-to example of uncontrollable natural force. Zeus threw it. Thor wielded it. Every culture has a god of lightning specifically because it seemed beyond human influence. We believe this because lightning is genuinely unpredictable at the individual bolt level. It moves at 200,000 miles per hour and branches chaotically through the atmosphere. But chaotic is not the same as uncontrollable. Chaos means sensitive to initial conditions, and if you can set those initial conditions, you can influence the outcome. That is exactly what the laser does. It heats air into plasma, creating a low-resistance corridor. Lightning, being electrical current, follows the path of least resistance. The laser hands it a highway. This technology has real applications for protecting airports, power plants, and launch pads. Lightning rods work. Laser lightning rods work better. The sky was never lawless. We just had not written the right rules yet. You can't live without a pulse. No pulse means death. This is not a belief. It is a medical fact drilled into every first responder and every person who has ever checked a neck for signs of life. The heartbeat is the most fundamental vital sign. When it stops, you stop. It is the definition of being alive. Then cardiac engineers built continuous flow ventricular assist devices. These machines replace the pumping action of the heart with a constantly spinning turbine that moves blood through the body in a smooth, uninterrupted stream. No beating, no pulse. Just a quiet mechanical whir inside the chest. There are people alive right now whose wrists reveal nothing to a stethoscope. Their blood pressure readings show a single flat number instead of the usual 2. The fallacy is the confusion of correlation and causation. Hearts beat and people are alive. Therefore, the beating must cause the aliveness. In reality, the heartbeat is just a delivery mechanism. What keeps you alive is blood flow, the continuous delivery of oxygen and nutrients to cells. The heart achieves this through rhythmic compression. A turbine achieves it through constant rotation. The destination is the same. The route does not matter. People believe this because the heartbeat is the first thing we hear in the womb and the most intimate sound we associate with life. Doctors pronounce death when it stops. Movies use the flat line to signal the end. The heartbeat is not just a medical sign. It is an emotional symbol. These devices were originally designed as bridges to keep patients alive while waiting for heart transplants. But some patients now live with them permanently, going years without a single heartbeat. They exercise, they work, they live. The pulse was never the point, the blood flow was. We confuse the messenger with the message. You can't unburn smoke. Once something burns, it is gone forever. Fire is the ultimate destroyer. It breaks molecular bonds and scatters atoms into the atmosphere as smoke and carbon dioxide. Combustion is a one-way ticket, the most irreversible process most people can imagine. Then, engineers built direct air capture machines that vacuum carbon dioxide directly out of the atmosphere and convert it back into useful materials. Companies like Carbon Engineering and Climeworks are operating plants right now that suck invisible CO2 from open air, concentrate it, and transform it into synthetic jet fuel and building materials. They are literally unburning the atmosphere. The fallacy is the appeal to entropy. We learn in school that entropy always increases, that disorder always wins. But the second law of thermodynamics applies to closed systems. Earth is not a closed system. It receives massive energy input from the sun every single day. With enough energy, you can reverse chemical processes that seem permanent. That is what photosynthesis has been doing for 3 billion years. People believe combustion is irreversible because fire is fast and dramatic, while reversal is slow and invisible. When you burn a log, you see flames in seconds. When a tree pulls that same carbon back out of the air, it takes decades. Our brains weight dramatic visible events far more heavily than slow, invisible ones. This is called the availability heuristic. The loud thing feels more real than the quiet thing. Direct air capture currently costs between $100 and $600 per ton of CO2 removed. That is expensive, but falling fast. The technology is real, operational, and scaling. The carbon your car released this morning is not gone forever. It is floating in the atmosphere, waiting to be recaptured. Burning was never a one-way door. It was just a door nobody had built the handle for yet. Glass always shatters. Glass is fragile. It is the universal symbol of breakability. Handle with care stickers exists because of glass. Drop it, and it shatters into dangerous shards. Bend it, and it snaps. This is not a limitation we question. It is the defining property of the material. Glass breaks. Then materials scientists developed ultra-thin, flexible glass that can bend in half without cracking. Corning, the company behind Gorilla Glass, created Willow Glass at just 100 micrometers thick, thinner than a human hair. Samsung and other manufacturers now use ultra-thin glass in folding phones that survive hundreds of thousands of folds. The glass bends like paper, not plastic pretending to be glass. Actual glass, with the hardness and optical clarity of traditional glass that folds. The fallacy is the hasty generalization. We interact with thick, rigid glass our entire lives. Windows, cups, screens. Every piece of glass we touch confirms the same conclusion. Glass is brittle. We take thousands of data points from everyday experience and extrapolate a universal rule. But the rule only applies to glass above a certain thickness. At the microscopic scale, glass is remarkably flexible because it has fewer internal defects where cracks can start. People believe glass must shatter because material science is not intuitive. We judge materials by how they behave in the forms we encounter them. Thick glass is rigid, therefore glass is rigid. But steel is rigid as a beam and flexible as a wire. Paper is flexible as a sheet and rigid as a compressed brick. Thickness changes everything. The material did not change. Our understanding of scale did. You are probably holding flexible glass right now if you own a modern folding phone. The same material your grandmother warned you not to drop is now being folded in your pocket 1,000 times a day. Glass was never inherently fragile, it was just thick. Trauma is permanent. Bad memories last forever. If something terrible happens to you, that experience is burned into your brain permanently. Therapy can help you cope, but the memory itself, the raw emotional wound, stays with you until you die. Trauma is the scar that never fully heals. This is what most people believe, and it shapes how we treat suffering. Then neuroscientists discovered memory reconsolidation, a process where every time you recall a memory, your brain briefly destabilizes it before storing it again. During that fragile window, researchers found that administering propranolol, a common blood pressure medication, can strip the emotional charge from a traumatic memory while leaving the factual content intact. You still remember what happened. You just stop reliving the terror. The fallacy is the appeal to permanence, a subset of the status quo bias. We assume that because trauma has always been treated as permanent, it must be biologically permanent. But memories are not static recordings. They are reconstructed every time they are accessed, like opening a document and saving a new version. Each recall is an opportunity to edit. People believe trauma is permanent because the experience of trauma feels permanent. Flashbacks intrude without warning. Nightmares repeat for years. The consistency of these symptoms makes permanence feel like the only explanation. Therapy traditions have also reinforced this by focusing on management rather than elimination. If the best your doctor offers is coping strategies, you naturally assume the underlying wound is untreatable. Clinical trials using reconsolidation-based techniques have shown dramatic reductions in PTSD symptoms. Some subjects report that triggering memories simply stopped producing fear responses after treatment. The memory persists, but the emotional payload is gone. Your brain was never a permanent archive. It is a living editor, constantly rewriting its own files. Trauma felt permanent because nobody knew the save window was open. Now we do, and the edit button works. Bleeding out takes time to stop. When a major wound opens, you grab a tourniquet, apply pressure, and pray the ambulance arrives in time. The body's natural clotting cascade takes minutes to form a proper seal, and for large wounds, it often cannot seal fast enough. Battlefield medics and trauma surgeons know this math intimately. Then bioengineers created plant-based hemostatic gels that stop catastrophic bleeding in seconds. Vetigel uses an algae-derived polymer that physically links with tissue at the wound site, creating an instant mechanical seal. Applied directly to a severe wound, it stops bleeding in under 12 seconds by bypassing your body's clotting entirely with a synthetic matrix, not by accelerating your body's clotting, by bypassing it entirely. The fallacy is the appeal to biological limitation. We assume that because our bodies clot at a certain speed, that speed represents an upper limit on wound sealing. But biological processes are default settings. Engineering can replace them with something faster, the same way a calculator replaces mental arithmetic. This belief persists because bleeding is visceral and frightening. When you see someone bleeding badly, your brain defaults to ancient techniques: pressure, elevation, tourniquet. Nobody questions them because in an emergency, you do not innovate. You execute. But gel-based hemostatics change the equation entirely. Military medics carry hemostatic agents like QuickClot and Combat Gauze, which use kaolin clay to accelerate clotting. The newer polymer gels create structure where there is none, working on a much faster timeline. These products are in testing and early deployment for both military and civilian trauma. The 12-second barrier is falling. Your body's clotting speed was never the final word on how fast a wound could close. It was the first draft. Humans are slow. Humans are slow and physically pathetic. A cheetah hits 70 miles per hour. A horse gallops at 40. A house cat outruns most people. We have no claws, no fangs, thin skin, and we overheat in the sun. In the animal kingdom, humans are the nerds who survived on brains alone. This is completely wrong. Humans are the greatest endurance runners in the entire animal kingdom. Over long distances on a hot day, a trained human will outrun a horse, a dog, a deer, and nearly every other mammal on Earth. The man versus horse marathon in Wales has been running since 1980, and humans have beaten horses multiple times in the 22-mile race. The fallacy is cherry-picking, also known as selection bias. We compare ourselves to animals at their best event, short sprints, and declare ourselves inferior. But sprinting is not the only race. Persistence hunting, where you chase prey until it collapses from heat exhaustion, was humanity's original hunting strategy for over 2 million years. We evolved specifically for this. We believe we are slow because modern life has no context for endurance running. We drive cars. We sit at desks. Without a frame of reference, we default to comparing ourselves against cheetah highlight reels. Sweat is our secret weapon. Most mammals cool by panting, which requires them to stop running. Humans cool by sweating while running. We have long Achilles tendons and a neutral ligament that stabilizes our heads during sustained running. We are not the animal kingdom's weaklings. We are its marathon champions. The cheetah sprints for 30 seconds and rests. The human keeps going for hours. Slow and steady wins the race and the species. Spider-Man tech isn't real. Climbing straight up a glass wall with your bare hands is pure comic book fantasy. Gravity, surface friction, and human body weight make it physically impossible. Even the best rock climbers need cracks and holds. A smooth vertical surface is game over. This will never leave the pages of fiction. Then engineers at the University of Massachusetts Amherst created GeckSkin, a synthetic adhesive pad inspired by gecko feet. An index card-sized piece can hold 700 pounds on a smooth glass surface. DARPA built full-body climbing systems that allowed a 218-pound man wearing 45 pounds of gear to climb a 25-foot vertical glass wall using handheld paddles. The fallacy is the appeal to incredulity. Because we cannot personally imagine how wall climbing would work, we dismiss it as impossible. Our inability to envision a mechanism is not evidence that no mechanism exists. People believe this because our daily experience tells a consistent story. Put your hand on a window and push. It slides. Try to climb glass. you fall. Thousands of confirming experiences create an unshakable intuition that smooth equals unclimbable. But geckos have been disproving this for 100 million years. Gecko adhesion works through van der Waals forces, weak molecular attraction between surfaces in close contact. Gecko toes have millions of microscopic hair structures that maximize surface area. Gecko skin replicates this using a stiff fabric weave bonded to a soft elastomer. The pad conforms to surface variations, is reversible, leaves no residue, and supports enormous loads. Spider-Man was never the fantasy. The technology he inspired is real, tested, and sitting in a DARPA lab right now. Asteroids are unstoppable. If a giant asteroid targets Earth, we simply die. That has been the consensus for as long as we have known about asteroid impacts. The dinosaurs could not stop it. Neither can we, most people believe. We just build telescopes, spot the threat, calculate the date, and accept our fate. Planetary defense is a thought experiment, not a real capability. Then, on September 26, 2022, NASA crashed a spacecraft called DART directly into the asteroid Dimorphos at 14,000 miles per hour. The impact changed the asteroid's orbital period by 32 minutes, a massive shift in space terms. For the first time in our solar system's history, a species deliberately altered a celestial body's trajectory. The fallacy is the fatalistic fallacy, a form of the appeal to nature. We assume that because natural disasters have always been unstoppable, they must remain unstoppable. Earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanic eruptions. None of these can be prevented, so asteroid impacts get filed in the same mental category. But asteroids are fundamentally different. They follow predictable orbits in the vacuum of space, where tiny forces produce huge changes over time. People believe asteroids are unstoppable because disaster movies trained us to expect humanity helpless until the last second. But DART was not a last-second Hail Mary. It was a planned, calculated test executed years in advance against a non-threatening target. The real strategy is early detection. Hit an asteroid 10 years before impact with even a small force, and you nudge it millions of miles off course. Small force times long time equals huge displacement. Dinosaurs went extinct because they had no space program. We do, and it works. The sky is no longer falling without our permission. Aging is inevitable. Aging is not a disease. It is life itself. Every living thing ages and dies. It is written into our biology as deeply as DNA. You can eat well, exercise, and avoid stress, but the clock keeps ticking. Nobody escapes time. Then researchers developed senolytics, drugs designed to selectively destroy senescent cells, damage cells that stop dividing but refuse to die, earning the nickname zombie cells. They accumulate with age, secrete inflammatory chemicals, and poison healthy tissue. In mouse studies, clearing these cells reversed age-related decline, improved heart function, extended healthy lifespan, and even restored fur thickness. The mice did not just live longer, they lived younger. The fallacy is the naturalistic fallacy. Because aging is natural, we assume it is either good or necessary. We confuse what is with what must be. Smallpox was natural too. We eliminated it. The naturalness of a process says nothing about whether it should be accepted or whether it can be altered. People accept aging as inevitable because every human who has ever lived has aged. When a phenomenon has a 100% occurrence rate across billions of cases, questioning it feels insane. We have built entire philosophies around accepting mortality gracefully. Challenging aging feels like challenging the meaning of life itself. But the biology is becoming clear. Aging is driven by identifiable mechanisms like cellular senescence, telomere shortening, epigenetic drift, and mitochondrial dysfunction. These are not mystical forces. They are biochemical processes that can be modified. Senolytic drugs are now in human clinical trials for osteoarthritis and idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. We are not curing death. We are treating the mechanisms that make the body deteriorate. Aging was never a law of physics. It was an engineering problem that biology never solved. We are just getting started on the blueprints. You can't regrow a limb, lose an arm, and it is gone forever. Humans simply do not regenerate limbs. Salamanders do. Starfish do. We do not. Our wound healing program seals the injury with scar tissue and calls it a day. Regrowth is not in the human playbook. Then researchers at Tufts University triggered adult frogs to fully regenerate amputated legs. Frogs normally cannot do this past the tadpole stage. The team applied a wearable bioreactor with a 5-drug cocktail to the amputation site for just 24 hours. Over 18 months, the frogs regrew functional legs with bones, nerves, muscles, and toes. The legs responded to touch, and the frogs could swim with them. The fallacy is the genetic determinism fallacy. We assume that because our genes do not include a regrow limb instruction set, regeneration is permanently off the table. But the research showed that the genetic machinery for limb growth already exists in adult cells. It is the same code that built the limb in the first place during embryonic development. It is just switched off. The drugs switch it back on. People believe limb loss is permanent because it always has been for mammals. We see lizards regrowing tails and dismiss it as a trick of lower organisms. Surely mammals are too complex for that. But complexity is not the barrier. The barrier is that mammalian wound healing evolved to prioritize speed over quality. Scar tissue forms fast. Regeneration takes months. The Tufts experiment proved that adult vertebrate cells retain regenerative potential. They just need the right chemical signals at the right time. The 24-hour drug exposure triggered a cascade that lasted 18 months. This is not limb printing. It is limb unlocking. The blueprint was always in the cells. We just forgot the password. Blindness is a dead end. Once the retina dies, vision is gone forever. Blindness caused by retinal degeneration has no cure. The photoreceptors that convert light to electrical signals are destroyed. Guide dogs and white canes are the only tools available. Then researchers used optogenetics to restore functional vision in a blind man. The technique involves injecting genes from light-sensitive algae into surviving retinal cells that normally do not detect light. These modified cells become artificial photoreceptors, directly responding to light and sending signals to the brain. In 2021, a clinical trial reported that a patient with retinitis pigmentosa, blind for 20 years, could perceive and locate objects using optogenetically treated eyes combined with special goggles. The fallacy is the composition fallacy. We assume that because photoreceptor cells are dead, the entire visual system must be non-functional. But the retina has multiple layers. Photoreceptors are just the front door. Ganglion cells that transmit signals to the brain often survive long after photoreceptors die. Optogenetics gives those surviving cells a new job. People believe blindness is permanent because losing a sense feels total. When sight disappears, the brain classifies it as irreversible. But you do not need to rebuild the whole system. You just need one working layer. The technology currently provides low-resolution vision. Patients see shapes and movement rather than fine detail. The goggles amplify and shift light into wavelengths the modified cells can detect. Dead photoreceptors are not the end of the story. They are just one chapter. The retina has backup systems, and we learned how to activate them using genes from pond algae. Biology is full of spare parts if you know where to look. Brain cells don't grow back. Kill a brain cell, and it is gone forever. Every drink, every concussion, every sleepless night permanently reduces your neuron count. The brain you have right now is the best it will ever be, and it is all downhill from here. Then neuroscientists discovered adult neurogenesis, the brain's ability to grow entirely new neurons well into adulthood. The hippocampus, the region responsible for learning and memory, generates new neurons throughout life. Stem cell therapies have rewired damaged brain tissue, restoring lost motor function in stroke patients months after the damage occurred. The fallacy is the appeal to authority. For over a century, the neuroscience establishment declared that adult brains do not produce new neurons. Santiago Ramon y Cajal, the father of modern neuroscience, stated it directly in 1928. His authority was so immense that the field treated his claim as settled law for 70 years. Researchers proved him wrong in the late 1990s, with direct evidence of new neuron growth in adult human brains. People believe this because the original claim came from legitimate science. When the greatest neuroscientist in history says brain cells do not regenerate, you believe him. The mistake was treating authority as permanent truth, rather than the best available hypothesis. Neuroplasticity research shows the adult brain is remarkably adaptable. After injury, surviving neurons rewire to compensate for damage. The brain was never a fixed machine slowly wearing down. It was a living system with repair capabilities nobody looked hard enough to find. The new model is dynamic, regenerative, and far more resilient than anyone in 1928 imagined. Lungs need air to survive. Breathing means pulling air into your lungs. Oxygen comes from gas. If your lungs fill with liquid, you drown. This is fundamental. Liquid in the lungs equals death. Then researchers submerged mammals in highly oxygenated liquid perfluorocarbon and kept them alive. Liquid ventilation works because perfluorocarbons dissolve enormous amounts of oxygen and carbon dioxide. The lungs extract oxygen from the liquid the same way they extract it from air through diffusion across alveolar membranes. The mechanism is identical, only the delivery medium changes. Experiments on human infants with severe respiratory distress showed that liquid breathing is sometimes superior to gas ventilation. The fallacy is the false equivalence between medium and function. We equate breathing with air because it is the only medium we have ever breathed. The logical structure is that breathing requires oxygen, air contains oxygen, therefore breathing requires air. This seems airtight until you realize oxygen is what matters and air is just coincidental. Any fluid carrying enough dissolved oxygen can serve the same function. People believe lungs need air because drowning is one of humanity's deepest fears. Water in the lungs is deadly because water does not carry enough dissolved oxygen. Our brains generalize from water to all liquids, concluding any non-air substance is lethal. But perfluorocarbons are not water. They carry 20 times more oxygen than blood plasma. Liquid ventilation treats acute respiratory distress syndrome, delivers drugs to damaged lung tissue, and enables deep sea diving without decompression sickness. The lungs were never air-specific organs. They are gas exchange membranes. They do not care if oxygen arrives in gas or liquid. They just need the molecules. We confuse the packaging with the product. Blood types are fixed. Your blood type is stamped into your biology at birth. Type A, Type B, AB, or O. It never changes. It is determined by antigens on the surface of your red blood cells, coded by your DNA. Blood banks exist because types must match. Mismatched transfusions kill people. The system is rigid and permanent. Then researchers discovered an enzyme from gut bacteria that strips the A and B antigens off red blood cells, converting them into type O, the universal donor type. Identified by a team at the University of British Columbia in 2019, it transforms type A blood into type O in about 30 minutes. This could eliminate blood type shortages because any donated blood could be converted to work for anyone. The fallacy is genetic essentialism. We believe that because blood type is genetically determined, it must be immutable. Your genes code for the antigens, therefore the antigens are permanent. But genes determine what cells produce, not what remains on their surfaces. An enzyme removing a surface marker does not change your DNA. It changes the end product. People believe blood types are fixed because they are treated as identity markers. Your blood type is on your medical bracelet and military dog tags. When something becomes part of your identity, permanence feels essential. Changing it feels like changing who you are. But the antigens are just sugar molecules on cell membranes. They serve as immune system tags. Remove the tags and the cell functions perfectly. The universal blood breakthrough could save millions of lives in emergencies. Your blood type was never a permanent stamp. It was a removable label. The label just needed the right solvent. Extinct means gone forever. Extinction is forever. Once the last member of a species dies, that genetic line is permanently severed. The dodo, the passenger pigeon, the woolly mammoth, gone. Their DNA decayed. Their ecosystems moved on. Extinction is the universe's delete button, and there is no recycle bin. Then, Colossal Biosciences announced a funded, active program to de-extinct the woolly mammoth using preserved DNA and advanced genetic engineering. The plan involves editing Asian elephant DNA, the mammoth's closest living relative, to incorporate mammoth genes for cold tolerance, smaller ears, subcutaneous fat, and shaggy fur. The modified embryo would be gestated in an artificial womb. The company has raised over $200 million, published peer-reviewed gene editing results, and set a target date for a living mammoth calf. The fallacy is the permanence bias, similar to the appeal to tradition. Extinction has always been permanent, so we assume it must always be permanent. We are generalizing from historical limitation to universal law. But the limitation was technological, not biological. DNA degrades, but it does not vanish instantly. Permafrost-preserved mammoth specimens contain readable genetic material tens of thousands of years old. People believe extinction is absolute because it has been for the entire history of conservation. Every species we have lost has stayed lost. That track record creates a feeling of finality that no press release about cloning can easily override. The technology faces real challenges. Genetic gaps in ancient DNA must be filled. Artificial womb technology must mature. Ecological reintegration is complex. But the fundamental question, can we bring back a species that evolution deleted, is being answered with increasing confidence. Extinction was never a law. It was a limitation. And limitations are temporary. Nothing is faster than light. Nothing can travel faster than light. Einstein said so. The speed of light in a vacuum is the absolute cosmic speed limit, 186,000 miles per second. No object, no signal, no information can exceed it. But Einstein actually said nothing can travel through space faster than light. That distinction matters enormously. In 1994, physicist Miguel Alcubierre published a theoretical solution to Einstein's field equations, allowing faster-than-light travel without violating relativity. The Alcubierre drive does not move a ship through space. It compresses space in front and expands it behind, creating a wave that carries the ship forward. The ship sits in a bubble of flat space-time and never locally exceeds light speed. Space itself moves around it. The fallacy is equivocation. We interpret nothing is faster than light as an absolute prohibition on faster than light travel. But the original claim is about objects moving through space-time, not space-time itself. Space can expand faster than light. It already does. The most distant galaxies are receding from us faster than light due to cosmic expansion, violating nothing. People believe the speed of light is the ultimate limit because it is repeated endlessly without the critical caveat. Pop science drops the nuance. Nothing is faster than light is a better bumper sticker than the accurate version. Nuance does not go viral. The Alcubierre drive remains theoretical. It requires exotic matter with negative energy density we have not produced. But the math is valid within general relativity. The cosmic speed limit was never about speed. It was about local motion rules. The universe's own expansion has been breaking the bumper sticker version since the Big Bang. Gravity always wins. What goes up must come down. Gravity is the one force you can never beat. It reaches across the entire universe, pulls everything toward everything else, and never turns off. Jump and you fall. Always. Then physicists discovered that focused sound waves create stable pressure pockets, holding objects suspended in mid-air. Acoustic levitation uses ultrasonic transducers aimed at each other, generating standing waves with fixed nodes where pressure difference counteracts gravity. Small objects placed in these nodes just float, held aloft by nothing visible. Magnetic levitation suspends trains, frogs, and water drops using powerful magnetic fields, opposing gravitational pull. The fallacy is the false dichotomy. We frame the relationship with gravity as win or lose. Either you overcome gravity permanently or stay on the ground. But levitation does not defeat gravity. It balances it with an equal and opposite force. Gravity still pulls down. The sound waves or magnetic fields push up. The object sits in equilibrium. Gravity still exists. It just does not get the last word anymore. People believe gravity is inescapable because daily life offers no counterexamples. Everything that floats eventually comes down. Balloons pop, planes land, rockets run out of fuel. Our experience is 100% consistent with gravity winning. But experience is limited to forces available in everyday life. Acoustic levitation is used in pharmaceutical research, manipulating tiny drug samples without container contamination. Magnetic levitation moves trains at 300 miles per hour in Japan and China. These are mature technologies. Gravity never stopped being a force. We just found other forces willing to argue with it. In a balanced argument, nobody has to win. Invisibility is pure magic. Making something invisible is the oldest fantasy in storytelling. From Greek mythology to Harry Potter, vanishing from sight requires supernatural power. Light bounces off every physical object, and our eyes detect that bounce. You cannot hide from photons. Then materials scientists built metamaterials that bend electromagnetic radiation around objects the way water flows around a stone. The object is still there, but light waves rejoin on the other side, as if passing through empty space. In the microwave frequency range, actual cloaking devices, Work in laboratory conditions. Invisible light. Researchers created lenticular lens arrays, making objects effectively vanish from specific angles. The fallacy is argument from ignorance. We assume that because no known natural material bends light around an object, the effect is impossible. But absence of a natural example is not evidence of impossibility. Evolution never needed to solve this problem. Engineering is not limited to what evolution produced. People believe invisibility is impossible because our visual system assumes light travels in straight lines. Straight line propagation feels so fundamental that bending light around an object feels like breaking reality. But light already bends. Gravity bends it. Glass bends it. Water bends it. Mirages create invisible roads using temperature gradients in air. Metamaterials work by having internal structures smaller than the wavelength of radiation they bend. These structures force electromagnetic waves along curved paths around the cloaked region. Current technology works best with longer wavelengths like microwaves and radar. Full visible light cloaking remains a challenge because visible wavelengths are very short. But the physics is proven. Light can bend around objects. Invisibility was never magic. It was an engineering specification waiting for the right materials. The specification is being filled. Computers have a max speed. Computers have a ceiling. Processors can only get so fast before hitting physical limits. Heat from electrical resistance, transistor size, electron flow through silicon. Moore's law is slowing down. We are approaching the hard wall of classical computing. Then, engineers built quantum computers that do not use classical bits. Instead of transistors flipping between 0 and 1, quantum computers use qubits existing in superposition. When qubits become entangled, they process vast numbers of possibilities in parallel. In 2019, Google's Sycamore processor solved a specific mathematical problem in 200 seconds that would have taken the most powerful supercomputer 10,000 years. The fallacy is linear extrapolation. We look at classical computing's trajectory approaching physical limits and assume all computing must hit those same limits. But quantum computing is not faster classical computing. It is a fundamentally different paradigm. Predicting computing's future by extrapolating silicon performance is like predicting transportation's future by extrapolating horse breeding. People believe computers have peaked because processor clock speeds plateau. For decades, computing was simple. Chips shrink, clocks speed up, computers improve. When that trend stalled around 2005, the narrative became, we are hitting the wall. But the wall only exists for one type of computation. Quantum supremacy does not mean quantum computers are universally faster. They excel at specific problem types like optimization, cryptography, molecular simulation, and machine learning. For those problems, the speed increase is not incremental. It is exponential. The maximum speed of a computer was never a fixed number. It was the maximum speed of a specific type. Change the type, change the limit. The ceiling was never the ceiling. It was the roof of one building, and we just moved next door to a skyscraper. Diamonds are the hardest material. Diamonds are forever, and nothing is harder. 10 on the Mohs scale. The ultimate. Every engagement ring commercial circles back to diamond as the champion. It is the hardest natural material known to science. Then scientists synthesize materials exceeding diamond's hardness. Lonsdaleite, a hexagonal form of carbon found in meteorite impact sites, is 58% harder than diamond in simulations. Wurtzite boron nitride is another contender. Graphene, a single layer of carbon atoms in a honeycomb lattice, is the strongest material ever measured relative to its thickness, about 200 times stronger than steel. The fallacy is anchoring bias. Diamond has been the champion for so long, it became the anchor point for all comparisons. When something is the best for centuries, our brains stop looking for something better. The anchor becomes a ceiling rather than a benchmark. We confuse best known with best possible. People believe diamonds are unbeatable because the diamond industry spent decades reinforcing the message. A diamond is forever is not a physics statement. It is a marketing slogan from De Beers. The cultural narrative mixes genuine material properties with commercial myth-making until they are inseparable. Lonsdaleite achieves superior hardness through a hexagonal crystal structure, distributing stress more efficiently than diamond's cubic structure. Both are pure carbon. The difference is geometry. Graphene's strength comes from perfect uniformity of covalent bonds within a two-dimensional lattice. Diamond is still extraordinarily hard, but it is no longer the hardest. The ranking was never frozen. Materials science keeps creating new entries, and the leaderboard changes whether jewelry commercials update their scripts or not. Tethers can't reach space. A physical cable stretching from Earth's surface to orbit is absurd. No material could support its own weight over that distance. Steel would snap. Titanium would snap. Every known substance collapses under gravitational stress long before reaching orbital altitude. The space elevator is a fun thought experiment and nothing more. Then materials scientists synthesized carbon nanotubes with tensile strengths exceeding 100 gigapascals, roughly 100 times stronger than steel at 1/6 the weight. This changes the math entirely. A space elevator requires a tether with specific strength above roughly 50 megapascal cubic meters per kilogram. Carbon nanotubes theoretically exceed this threshold. The concept involves anchoring a cable at the equator, extending it to geostationary orbit at roughly 22,000 miles, then counterbalancing it with cable beyond that. The fallacy is the technology projection fallacy. We evaluate future engineering using current materials and declare it impossible when they fail. This is like declaring flight impossible because human arms cannot generate enough lift. The conclusion is correct for the stated premise and utterly irrelevant to the actual solution. People believe the space elevator is fantasy because the gap between concept and execution feels too wide. We imagine the cable but not the material. That imagination gap fills with skepticism. If I cannot picture the solution, it must be unsolvable. But carbon nanotubes were not pictured by anyone before 1991. Materials do not wait for human imagination to approve them. Significant engineering challenges remain. Manufacturing continuous nanotubes at scale, handling micrometeorite impacts, managing oscillations from atmospheric winds, and building the anchor station require advances beyond current capability. But the material barrier, the reason everyone said it was impossible, is falling. The tether can theoretically hold itself. The rest is engineering. And engineering is what humans do best. Plastic lasts forever. Plastic never goes away. A water bottle tossed in a landfill will still be there in 500 years. The oceans are choking on it. The soil is laced with it. Microplastics are in our blood, our food, and our rain. Plastic is the permanent stain on our planet, the one material that refuses to decompose. Then, in 2016, scientists in Japan discovered Ideonella sakaiensis, a bacterium that eats PET plastic. The organism produces two enzymes that break down polyethylene terephthalate into its chemical building blocks. Researchers have since engineered faster versions that can degrade a plastic bottle in hours rather than weeks. The fallacy is the appeal to permanence. We observe plastic lasting decades and extrapolate that it will last forever. But lasts a long time and lasts forever are profoundly different claims. Diamonds last a long time too, so does granite. Neither is permanent. We round up from durable to eternal because our lifespans make centuries feel like infinity. People believe plastic is indestructible because it was designed to be durable. Chemists engineered it to resist moisture, bacteria, UV light, and chemical breakdown. When nature had not developed a way to eat it after 70 years of mass production, we assumed nature never would. But 70 years is nothing in evolutionary time. Ideonella sakaiensis appears to have evolved its plastic-eating ability naturally in a recycling plant. Enhanced enzyme treatments are now being tested at commercial scale. Companies like Carbios are building facilities that use engineered enzymes to recycle PET plastic infinitely. The permanent pollutant was never permanent, it was just new, and biology was still working on the recipe. Ocean water is undrinkable. 97% of Earth's water is salt water, and you cannot drink it. Desalination exists, but it requires massive energy, specialized infrastructure, and enormous cost. For most of the world, the ocean is a taunt, an endless supply of water that might as well be poison. We live on a water planet and still face water shortages. The irony is crushing. Then researchers developed graphene oxide membranes with pores so precisely sized that they let water molecules pass through while physically blocking sodium chloride ions. The pores are adjustable, measured in angstroms, and can be tuned to filter out specific contaminants with extraordinary selectivity. Unlike traditional reverse osmosis membranes that require high pressure and enormous energy, graphene sieves can potentially operate at much lower pressures because the membrane is only one atom thick. The fallacy is the status quo bias. Desalination has always been expensive and energy intensive, so we assume it must remain that way. Current technology becomes the permanent ceiling. We look at the cost of reverse osmosis plants and conclude that turning seawater into drinking water will always be impractical for most of the world. But cost curves are not flat lines. They are slopes, and new materials change the angle. People believe ocean water is permanently undrinkable because the scale of the problem feels overwhelming. 700 million people lack access to clean water. The ocean contains 326 million trillion gallons. The gap between problem and solution seems too vast for any technology to bridge. Graphene oxide membranes are still in the research phase for large-scale desalination. Manufacturing defect-free membranes at industrial scale remains difficult, but the principle has been demonstrated repeatedly. Water passes through. Salt does not. The ocean was never undrinkable. It was just unfiltered, and the filter is getting thinner and cheaper every year. Nuclear waste is a million-year curse. Nuclear power generates waste so deadly, it must be entombed in concrete and buried underground for 1 million years. Spent fuel rods remain radioactive for geological timescales. This is the original sin of nuclear energy: clean electricity today, poison for future generations to deal with forever. It kills nuclear power in every public debate. Then engineers designed fast neutron reactors that use spent nuclear fuel as their primary energy source. These reactors operate with fast-moving neutrons that can fission the heavy isotopes in nuclear waste. The waste coming out of a fast reactor is radioactive for roughly 300 years instead of 300,000. Some designs consume up to 95% of the original fuel's energy content, compared to roughly 5% from conventional reactors. The fallacy is the single-frame fallacy. We look at nuclear waste at one point in the technology timeline and declare the problem permanent. In 1960, electronic waste was permanent too. Technology creates problems and then solves them. People believe nuclear waste is a permanent curse because the numbers are terrifying. 1 million years of radioactivity. Plutonium half-lives, measured in tens of thousands of years. These timescales exceed human comprehension, and anything we cannot comprehend, we fear absolutely. The fear is rational. The permanence is not. Russia, China, India, and France are all developing or operating fast reactor designs. Russia's BN-800 reactor has been running since 2016. The technology is not theoretical. The fuel it uses is sitting in cooling ponds at every conventional nuclear plant on Earth. We were never cursed with permanent waste. We just had not finished building the machine that eats it. We killed the ozone layer. The ozone layer is gone, and we destroyed it. CFCs from refrigerators and aerosol cans ripped a hole in the atmosphere that will never heal. We broke the sky, and nothing can fix it. Except the ozone layer is actively healing. Because the world collectively banned chlorofluorocarbons through the Montreal Protocol in 1987, the chemicals destroying ozone have been declining for decades. NASA satellite measurements show the ozone hole over Antarctica has been shrinking. Current projections estimate full recovery to 1980 levels by approximately 2066. The atmospheric chemistry is reversing now that we stopped adding the poison. The fallacy is the catastrophizing fallacy. We take a real environmental crisis, add emotional weight, and promote it from serious damage to irreversible destruction. The ozone crisis was genuinely dangerous. But the narrative hardened into permanence long after the solution was working. People still believe the ozone is destroyed because the update never went viral the way the original alarm did. Bad news sticks and good news slides off. The ozone crisis dominated headlines in the 1980s and early 1990s. The recovery has been quiet, gradual, and boring. Nobody writes breathless news articles about atmospheric chemistry slowly returning to normal. The Montreal Protocol is arguably humanity's greatest environmental achievement. 197 countries agreed to phase out an entire class of industrial chemicals, and it worked. The ozone layer responded exactly as the scientists predicted. This is proof that collective action on atmospheric chemistry succeeds. We did not kill the ozone layer, we wounded it. And when we stopped stabbing it, it started healing. The scar is fading. Wastelands are dead zones. A barren wasteland is a dead zone. Once topsoil erodes, the land is finished. Desertification is the final stage of environmental collapse. Nothing grows. Nothing returns. The dust and rock stretch to the horizon. Then China proved otherwise by terraforming the Loess Plateau. This region, roughly the size of Belgium, had been one of the most eroded landscapes on Earth. Centuries of overgrazing and deforestation had stripped it to bare rock and dust. Starting in 1999, a massive government program terraced the hillsides, planted millions of trees, and rebuilt the soil using organic composting and sediment capture. Within 2 decades, the plateau transformed from a barren moonscape into a lush green agricultural region. The fallacy is the point of no return fallacy. We assume that once environmental degradation crosses a threshold, recovery is impossible. But ecosystems are dynamic systems with multiple stable states. With sufficient intervention, they can be pushed back toward productive stability. People believe wastelands are permanent because natural recovery is painfully slow. Our lifespans are too short to witness natural recovery, so we classify the damage as final. But nature's timeline is not the only timeline. Directed human effort operates on a much faster clock. The lowest plateau restoration is not unique. Ethiopia's Tigray region has seen similar results. The Great Green Wall project across Africa's Sahel aims to restore 100 million hectares of degraded land. Degraded land is not dead land. The soil biology is dormant, not extinct. Seed banks persist. Microbial communities survive in trace amounts. The foundation for recovery exists beneath the dust. Add water management, erosion control, and appropriate planting, and the system reboots. Wastelands were never dead. They were dormant, and dormant systems can be woken up. Weather is uncontrollable. The weather does whatever it wants. You can predict it somewhat. You can prepare for it. But controlling it is pure hubris. Hurricanes form where they form. Rain falls where it falls. Humans are passengers on Earth's atmospheric system, not drivers. Then atmospheric scientists started modifying weather on purpose, and it worked. Cloud seeding, the practice of injecting silver iodide or other particles into clouds to trigger or enhance rainfall, has been used operationally since the 1940s. China deployed cloud seeding across Beijing before the 2008 Olympics to ensure clear skies. The United Arab Emirates runs regular cloud seeding operations to increase rainfall in the desert. Marine cloud brightening sprays sea salt particles into low clouds to make them more reflective and weaken hurricanes by cooling the sea surface beneath them. The fallacy is the appeal to scale. Because weather systems span hundreds of miles and involve trillions of tons of air, we assume they are beyond human influence. But influence does not require matching scale. A single silver iodide flare weighing a few grams can nucleate billions of ice crystals in a cloud. Small inputs can have large effects in chaotic systems. People believe weather is uncontrollable because we conflate uncontrollable with unpredictable. Weather is somewhat unpredictable because it is a chaotic system sensitive to initial conditions. But sensitivity to initial conditions is exactly what makes it controllable. If small changes produce large effects, then small deliberate changes can produce large deliberate effects. Weather modification is a multi-billion-dollar global industry operating in over 50 countries right now. We are not commanding the skies. We are nudging them. And nudges, applied correctly, change outcomes. We're running out of farmland. The world is running out of land to grow food. 7 billion people need calories. The population keeps climbing. We have already converted nearly every suitable acre to agriculture, and what remains is being lost to urban sprawl and climate change. A food crisis is mathematically inevitable. Then, agricultural engineers built vertical farms that produce 300% more food per square foot than traditional farming, while using 95% less water and zero arable land. Vertical aeroponics grows plants in stacked indoor layers, feeding their roots with nutrient-rich mist instead of soil. LED lighting drives photosynthesis at accelerated rates. Temperature, humidity, and nutrients are precisely controlled. Crops grow year-round regardless of season or location. The fallacy is the fixed pie fallacy. We assume that food production is permanently tied to available flat land with good soil and adequate rainfall. But this calculation only holds if farming technology stays static. Vertical farming changes the denominator entirely. People believe a food crisis is inevitable because historical famines were caused by land shortages. Malthus predicted it in 1798. Our mental model has not updated much since then. more people still feels like it must eventually mean not enough food. But food production per acre has increased over 400% since Malthus wrote his essay. Vertical farming removes the acre from the equation entirely. A vertical farm in a shipping container can produce the same annual yield as several acres of conventional farmland. Companies like Plenty and Aero Farms are operating commercial vertical farms that supply grocery chains right now. The food crisis was never about land, it was about technology, and the technology just decoupled farming from the ground. The oceans are too big to clean. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is twice the size of Texas. The amount of plastic in the ocean is too vast for human intervention to make any difference. Every cleanup effort is a drop in the bucket. The ocean is too big and the trash is too scattered. Then a 22-year-old Dutch inventor named Boyan Slat designed a system to do it anyway. The Ocean Cleanup Project deployed autonomous floating barriers that use ocean currents to passively funnel surface plastic into collection areas. By 2023, the system had extracted hundreds of thousands of kilograms of trash from the Pacific. The latest System 3 design is projected to clean up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch within the decade. Interceptor barges stationed in rivers are catching plastic before it reaches the ocean. The fallacy is the defeatist fallacy. We compare the current state of ocean pollution against a perfect solution and declare the problem unsolvable because perfection is impossible. No single system can clean every piece of plastic, therefore cleanup is pointless. But the choice was never between perfection and nothing. It was between less trash and more trash. Less is better, even if it is not zero. People believe the oceans are uncleanable because the problem looks overwhelming. But the garbage is not evenly distributed. It concentrates in gyres, predictable locations where currents converge. Target the hotspots, and you address a disproportionate share of the problem. River interception systems catch 80% of ocean-bound plastic at just 1,000 river mouths worldwide. The solution is both reactive and preventive. The ocean was never too big to clean. The problem was never the ocean's size. It was our willingness to start, and we started. Meat requires slaughter. Meat comes from animals, and getting it requires killing them. Billions of animals are raised and slaughtered every year to produce the beef, chicken, and pork that feed the world. If you eat meat, something died. Then food scientists grew real meat from animal cells in stainless steel bioreactors without involving a single animal beyond a tiny initial biopsy. Cultivated meat starts with a small sample of muscle cells taken painlessly from a living animal. Those cells are placed in a nutrient medium that mimics the conditions inside an animal's body. They divide and grow into muscle tissue that is biologically identical to conventional meat. In 2023, the United States Department of Agriculture approved cultivated chicken for commercial sale. The fallacy is the false necessity fallacy. We assume that because meat has always required slaughter, slaughter is a necessary condition for meat. But meat is just animal muscle tissue. The animal is the bioreactor that builds the tissue. Replace the bioreactor and you still get the tissue. The organism was always the means, not the end product. People believe meat requires killing because it always has. 10,000 years of animal husbandry created a deep psychological link between livestock and food. Hunting predates agriculture by hundreds of thousands of years. The equation meat equals death is carved into our species' relationship with food. Separating them feels unnatural because the connection is literally prehistoric. Cultivated meat costs have dropped from $330,000 per burger patty in 2013 to under $10 in recent estimates. multiple companies are racing to reach price parity with conventional meat. The biology is proven. The muscle cells do not know they are in a vat instead of an animal. Meat never required slaughter. It required cell growth. We just used animals as the growth medium because we had not built a better one. The vacuum of space is an instant kill. Step into space without a suit and you die instantly. Your blood boils, your lungs explode, your eyes pop out. Space is the ultimate hostile environment. Vacuum, radiation, temperature extremes. Nothing survives raw exposure to the void. Then scientists discovered that tardigrades, microscopic animals found in pond water, survived direct exposure to the vacuum of space. In 2007, the European Space Agency sent tardigrades outside the International Space Station for 10 days. They survived vacuum, cosmic radiation, and ultraviolet exposure hundreds of times stronger than the surface of Earth. Some even laid viable eggs afterward. Engineers are now developing mechanical counter-pressure suits that protect humans using tight elastic compression rather than pressurized gas. The fallacy is the all-or-nothing fallacy. We assume that because space is hostile across multiple dimensions, protection must address every threat simultaneously. But vacuum, radiation, and temperature are separate problems with separate solutions. Counter-pressure suits handle vacuum by physically pressing against the skin, preventing body fluids from boiling without needing a rigid shell. Separate layers handle radiation and thermal regulation. People believe space exposure is instant death because movies show explosive decompression, and science education emphasizes the dangers. In reality, a human exposed to vacuum would remain conscious for about 15 seconds and could survive up to 90 seconds if repressurized. Blood does not boil visibly. Lungs do not explode unless you hold your breath. The body is more resilient to vacuum than pop culture suggests. Tardigrade survival research is being applied to astrobiology and space medicine. Scientists are exploring ways to give human cells similar protective chemistry found in tardigrades. Space was never an instant kill zone. It was a hostile environment, and hostile environments are engineering problems. The vacuum is dangerous. It is not magic. Deep space radiation will fry us, send humans to Mars, and cosmic radiation will destroy them before they arrive. Galactic cosmic rays cause cancer, neurological damage, and organ failure. Without Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere as a shield, astronauts are sitting ducks. Then biologists discovered fungi growing inside the Chernobyl reactor that actively feed on gamma radiation. These radiotrophic fungi use melanin to absorb ionizing radiation and convert it into metabolic energy through a process similar to photosynthesis. They eat radiation. Researchers tested these fungi on the International Space Station and found they can reduce radiation exposure by measurable amounts in thin layers. The fallacy is the single variable projection. We identify radiation as a problem, project it forward as unsolvable, and conclude deep space travel is impossible. But biology is not static. It adapts, and in this case, it already adapted inside the most radioactive building on Earth. We assume the problem is permanent because we only model the threat without modeling the countermeasure. People believe space radiation is an absolute barrier because the numbers are frightening. A round trip to Mars exposes astronauts to roughly 1 sievert of radiation, significantly increasing cancer risk. When you hear those statistics without a solution, the conclusion feels obvious. But the statistics describe the problem under current shielding. Change the shielding and you change the statistics. Researchers are now developing biohybrid radiation shields that incorporate radiotrophic fungal melanin into spacecraft panels. Combined with water shielding, polyethylene barriers, and electromagnetic deflection concepts, a layered approach could reduce exposure to manageable levels. Deep space radiation was never a death sentence. It was an engineering requirement. And the engineering requirement has a biological template growing in the ruins of Chernobyl. Rocket fuel is too heavy for deep space. Chemical rockets burn massive amounts of fuel for short bursts of thrust. Every pound of fuel requires more fuel to carry it. To reach deep space, you would need more fuel than any rocket can carry. Chemical propulsion traps us in the inner solar system. Then engineers built ion thrusters that shoot ionized xenon gas at speeds exceeding 90,000 miles per hour using only electricity. The thrust is tiny, about the force of a sheet of paper on your palm. But it runs continuously for years, gradually building velocity that chemical rockets cannot match. NASA's Dawn spacecraft used ion propulsion to visit the asteroid Vesta and the dwarf planet Ceres on a single mission, something no chemical rocket could accomplish. The fallacy is the false analogy. We compare all space propulsion to chemical rockets because that is what took us to the moon. But the analogy breaks down when you switch to a system that trades thrust for efficiency. Ion engines are tens of thousands of times more fuel efficient than chemical rockets. They just accelerate slowly. People believe chemical propulsion is the only viable option because Apollo and the space shuttle defined space travel imagery: fire, smoke, thunder. That dramatic visual became the template. Ion thrusters are silent and invisible. A spacecraft under ion power looks like it is doing nothing. The lack of drama makes it hard to take seriously. But ion propulsion has proven itself across multiple missions. Dawn, Hayabusa, and the upcoming Psyche mission use electric propulsion. Solar electric systems convert sunlight into electricity, which ionizes and accelerates propellant. No combustion, no massive fuel tanks, just patient, relentless acceleration. Deep space was never too far. Our first engine was just too thirsty. The second engine sips instead of gulps and can run for a decade. Black holes are invisible. A black hole is invisible by definition. Its gravity is so extreme that not even light can escape. If light cannot leave, we cannot see it. No instrument can capture an image of something that emits 0 photons. Seeing a black hole is a logical impossibility baked into physics. Then, on April 10, 2019, the Event Horizon Telescope collaboration released the first image of a black hole. The supermassive black hole at the center of galaxy Messier 87, 53 million light-years away, appeared as a bright ring of superheated gas surrounding a dark central shadow. The image was captured by synchronizing 8 radio telescopes across 4 continents to function as a single Earth-sized virtual telescope using very long baseline interferometry. The fallacy is the equivocation fallacy. When we say you cannot see a black hole, we mean you cannot see the event horizon itself, the point of no return. That is true. But seeing something does not require seeing it directly. You can see a black hole by seeing what it does to everything around it. The accretion disk of superheated gas orbiting the hole glows brilliantly in radio wavelengths. The shadow in the center is the black hole's silhouette. People believe black holes are invisible because the name implies invisibility. Black holes are actually some of the brightest objects in the universe when actively feeding. Quasars, powered by supermassive black holes, outshine entire galaxies. The imaging achievement required processing 5 petabytes of data collected over several nights and combined using atomic clocks synchronized to billionths of a second. The technical challenge was extreme, but the physics was straightforward. The black hole was always visible. We just needed a telescope the size of a planet to see it clearly. We built that telescope, and the invisible became iconic. Space mining is sci-fi. Mining asteroids for resources is a science fiction trope, alongside warp drives and alien invasions. The idea of flying to a space rock and bringing back valuable materials barely qualifies as a goal. Then NASA launched the Psyche mission in 2023 toward the asteroid 16 Psyche, a 200-mile-wide chunk of metal believed to be the exposed core of a failed protoplanet. The asteroid contains estimated reserves of iron, nickel, and precious metals valued at figures that dwarf the global economy. Meanwhile, companies like Astroforge have launched prototype spacecraft to test refining techniques on asteroid material in orbit. The Japanese Hayabusa 2 mission already returned physical samples from the asteroid Ryugu in 2020. The fallacy is the incredulity fallacy combined with temporal discounting. Because asteroid mining sounds fantastical and the timeline is long, we assign it 0 probability. We cannot imagine the intermediate steps between today and an operating space mine, so we classify it as fiction. But we also could not imagine the steps between the Wright Flyer and the Boeing 747, and that took only 66 years. People classify space mining as fiction because it has only existed in fiction. Every reference comes from books and movies, not engineering papers. But the line between fiction and engineering proposal is just funding and physics. Near-Earth asteroids pass within a few million miles of our planet regularly. Some are small enough to intercept with current propulsion technology. Water ice on asteroids could be converted to rocket fuel in space, eliminating the need to launch it from Earth. Metal-rich asteroids contain platinum group elements critical for electronics and catalysts. Space mining is not happening tomorrow, but reconnaissance has started. The samples are coming back. The economics are being modelled. Fiction became proposal, and proposal is becoming engineering. The timeline is not never. It is not yet. There's no gravity in space. Astronauts float in space because there is no gravity up there. Once you leave Earth's atmosphere, gravity simply stops. The ISS orbits in a gravity-free zone. No gravity, no weight, no down. Simple. This is completely wrong. The ISS orbits at roughly 250 miles above Earth, where gravity is still about 90% as strong as on the surface. Astronauts float not because gravity is absent, but because they are in perpetual free fall. The station and everything in it falls toward Earth at the same rate, but moves sideways fast enough that it constantly misses. This creates weightlessness while gravity is fully operational. The fallacy is confusing correlation with causation. Astronauts float, and they are in space. Therefore, space must cause floating. But floating is caused by orbital mechanics, not by the absence of gravity. A person in a falling elevator on Earth experiences the same weightlessness. The location is irrelevant. The free fall is what matters. People believe there is no gravity in space because zero gravity is used casually by media and NASA. The shorthand is convenient but misleading. Microgravity is technically correct, yet even that understates how much gravity is present. The confusion is reinforced every time someone sees floating astronauts and concludes the obvious. This matters because artificial gravity is a solvable engineering problem. Spin a spacecraft and centripetal acceleration pushes everything toward the outer wall, simulating gravity. The math was worked out decades ago. A spinning habitat with a radius of about 100 meters at 2 rotations per minute would generate roughly 1 Earth gravity. This could prevent the bone density loss, muscle atrophy, and vision problems that plague astronauts on long missions. Gravity never disappeared in space. It just stopped being obvious. And the solution to its apparent absence was always just a spin away. You can't farm in zero-G. Plants need gravity. Roots grow down, stems grow up, and water moves through soil because gravity pulls it. Take away gravity, and the entire agricultural system collapses. Farming in space is either impossible or requires artificial gravity we cannot yet produce. Then astronauts on the International Space Station grew and ate fresh lettuce, radishes, and chili peppers using the veggie and advanced plant habitat systems. These chambers use no soil. Seeds are planted in ceramic clay substrate or porous pouches. LED lights tuned to red, blue, and green wavelengths drive photosynthesis. Water is delivered directly to roots through capillary action and wicking systems that work without gravity. The plants grow perfectly well. The fallacy is the argument from design. We observe that plants on Earth work with gravity and conclude gravity must be essential. But plants do not need gravity. They need light, water, nutrients, and carbon dioxide. Gravity is just one delivery mechanism for water, and not even the most efficient one. Capillary forces pull water through narrow spaces, regardless of gravitational orientation. People believe space farming is impossible because every plant they have seen grows in soil, outdoors, under the sun, with gravity pointing down. Our agricultural experience is so thoroughly terrestrial that imagining it any other way feels absurd. But the plant does not care where it is. It cares about photons, water molecules, and mineral ions. Deliver those, and it grows. The ISS garden experiments are not just curiosities. They are proof of concept for food production on the Moon and Mars, where gravity exists, but conditions are otherwise hostile. Long-duration missions cannot rely on resupply from Earth. Growing food in transit and on arrival is required, and the required thing already works. Space farming is not theoretical. Astronauts are eating the salad right now. You need 8 hours of sleep. 8 hours of sleep per night is the non-negotiable biological requirement. Less than that, and you are damaging your brain, heart, immune system, and lifespan. This number is treated as sacred medical advice, repeated by doctors, wellness influencers, and every mattress commercial. 8 hours. No shortcuts. No exceptions. The reality is more nuanced. Sleep research shows that optimal sleep duration varies significantly between individuals, driven by genetics, age, and lifestyle. DARPA-funded research into orexin A, a neuropeptide that regulates wakefulness. In primate studies, a nasal spray delivering orexin A restored full cognitive function in sleep-deprived monkeys, eliminating performance deficits from sleep loss. The fallacy is the one-size-fits-all fallacy. We take a population average and promote it to a universal prescription. The 8-hour recommendation comes from studies that found associations between that duration and lower mortality risk in large groups. But an average is not a target. Some people function optimally on 6 hours due to a mutation in the DEC2 gene. Others need 9. People cling to the 8-hour rule because sleep advice is delivered with moral weight. Sleeping less is framed as irresponsible. Getting enough sleep is a virtue. This obscures the actual science, which shows substantial individual variation. Historical sleep patterns also challenge the 8-hour block. Pre-industrial humans practiced segmented sleep, 2 shorter periods separated by an hour of quiet wakefulness at midnight. The consolidated 8-hour block is a modern invention enabled by artificial lighting, not a biological imperative. None of this means sleep deprivation is safe. Chronic insufficient sleep causes serious health problems. The point is, that insufficient is not a fixed number. Your body knows how much sleep it needs. The magic number is not 8. It is whatever leaves you alert and functional. Your biology is more specific than a billboard. We only use 10% of our brains. Humans only use 10% of their brains. Imagine what we could do if we unlock the other 90%. This is one of the most popular science myths ever, repeated in movies and self-help books. It suggests we are all walking around with massive untapped potential waiting to be switched on. This is pure fiction. Functional MRI scans show that virtually every region of the brain is active during the course of a day. Even during sleep, significant brain areas are firing. There is no dark, unused 90% sitting idle. Every region has a documented function. Damage to small brain areas causes measurable deficits. If 90% were unused, brain injuries would rarely matter. They always matter. The fallacy is the appeal to potential, a form of wishful thinking elevated to fact. We want to believe we have untapped abilities. The 10% myth provides a scientific framework for that hope. If you are only using a fraction of your capacity, then success is unlocking more. The myth likely originated from misinterpretations of early neuroscience. Researchers found that stimulating certain brain areas produced no observable response, concluding those areas were inactive. In reality, those regions handle planning, personality, and abstract thought not visible in stimulation experiments. The brain uses roughly 20% of your body's total energy, despite being only 2% of your weight. Evolution does not maintain expensive organs with 90% idle capacity. Every calorie your brain burns serves a purpose. The 100 billion neurons are organized into networks of staggering efficiency, processing sensory input, maintaining memories, regulating your body, and generating consciousness. You are already using all of your brain. The untapped potential is not in unused neurons. It is in how you train and connect the ones you have. The truth is impressive. You are running at full capacity right now and still learning. A sub-2-hour marathon is biologically impossible. No human can run 26.2 miles in under 2 hours. The math does not work. You would need to maintain a pace of 4 minutes and 34 seconds per mile for the entire distance. Exercise physiologists calculated maximum oxygen uptake, lactate thresholds, and concluded the body cannot sustain that output. The 2-hour marathon was a hard biological wall. Then, on October 12, 2019, Eliud Kipchoge ran the marathon distance in 1 hour, 59 minutes, and 40 seconds in Vienna. He crossed the line with time to spare, shattering a barrier experts had declared biologically unreachable. His average pace was 4 minutes and 33.5 seconds per mile. The fallacy is the argument from current limitation. We measure the best current performance, calculate how close it is to theoretical maximums, and declare the gap uncrossable. But theoretical maximums are based on models, and models are simplifications. They cannot account for innovations in training, nutrition, pacing, and mental preparation not yet invented. People believed the 2-hour barrier was permanent because it had stood for so long. The marathon record improved by only a few minutes over decades. The closer it got to 2 hours, the slower the progress, suggesting an asymptotic limit. This is the same logic that said the 4-minute mile was impossible before Roger Bannister broke it in 1954. Within 3 years, 16 other runners had done it. The barrier was psychological, not physical. Kipchoge's run used legal pacemakers and a flat course, so it does not count as official record. But the biological question was never about records. It was whether a human body could cover that distance that fast. It can. The body performed. The clock confirmed. The impossible became real. Human limits are proposals, not verdicts. Every generation rewrites them. The limit was never where we thought it was. Extreme cold is an instant killer. Prolonged exposure to extreme cold kills humans. Hypothermia sets in, core body temperature drops, organs shut down, and you die. Cold pushes the body outside its operating range permanently. Then Wim Hof climbed Mount Kilimanjaro in shorts. He sat submerged in ice for nearly 2 hours. He ran a half marathon above the Arctic Circle barefoot. When scientists studied him, they found he could voluntarily influence his autonomic nervous system and immune response through breathing techniques and cold exposure training, capabilities previously believed impossible. The fallacy is the argument from default settings. We assume that because the body's default response to cold is uncontrolled shivering and shutdown, that response is the only possible one. Defaults feel like limits, but the autonomic nervous system is not as autonomous as the name suggests. Research in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences showed that individuals trained in Hof's method could suppress inflammatory immune responses and maintain core temperature under cold stress significantly better than untrained controls. People believe cold is an unconditional killer because it usually is. Without training, extreme cold exposure is genuinely lethal. But the key word is untrained. The difference between dying in cold water and surviving it is not genetic superiority. It is practice. Brown fat activation, controlled breathing, and deliberate vasoconstriction can all be developed through progressive cold exposure training. This does not mean anyone can become immune to freezing. Prolonged exposure will still kill. But the window between comfortable and dead is much wider than most people realize. The human body is not a fixed temperature machine. It is an adaptable system with dormant cold tolerance capabilities that most people never activate. The default was never the limit. It was the starting point. Blind people can't navigate alone. Without sight, navigating the world independently seems extremely limited. Blind individuals often depend on guide dogs, canes, or other people. The loss of vision seems to mean the loss of spatial awareness. Getting around alone without eyes appears functionally impossible. Then, researchers documented blind individuals navigating complex environments with remarkable precision using human echolocation. By producing sharp tongue clicks and listening to echoes bouncing from surrounding surfaces, skilled echolocators determine the size, shape, distance, and material composition of objects around them. Brain imaging shows these individuals process echo information in their visual cortex, the same region sighted people use for seeing. Their brains repurpose the visual system for sonar. The fallacy is the assumed dependency fallacy, a form of single cause error. We assume that because sighted people depend on vision for navigation, navigation must depend on vision. But navigation depends on spatial information, and vision is only one source. Sound provides spatial information too. So does touch, air pressure, temperature variation, and proprioception. People believe blind navigation is impossible because sighted people cannot imagine losing their dominant sense and still functioning. We are so vision dependent that removing sight feels like removing the ability to perceive reality entirely. But that is a failure of imagination, not a statement about blind people's actual capabilities. The visual cortex reallocates when deprived of visual input, processing other sensory streams with the same computational power it formerly dedicated to sight. Expert echolocators ride bicycles through traffic, hike trails, and navigate unfamiliar buildings. The skill is learnable, not innate. Blindness was never a navigation death sentence. The tools for independent navigation were always there. They just came from the ears instead of the eyes. You can't learn while you sleep. Sleep is downtime. Your brain switches off, consciousness disappears, and nothing productive happens until the alarm rings. Learning something while unconscious seems like wishful thinking, the kind of myth that sells sleep learning audio tapes that never work. Sleep is for rest, not education. Then neuroscientists demonstrated targeted memory reactivation, where playing specific sounds or scents during deep sleep strengthens memories associated with those cues. Subjects who studied material paired with specific sounds scored significantly higher on recall tests when those sounds were replayed during slow-wave sleep. The memories were not created during sleep, but reinforced and consolidated by reactivating them at the precise moment the brain was already doing memory maintenance. The fallacy is the straw man fallacy. The legitimate claim that sleep enhances memory consolidation gets conflated with the ridiculous claim that you absorb entirely new information while unconscious. By attacking the silly version, we dismiss the real one. Learning during sleep is not about uploading new data into a sleeping brain. It is about amplifying the brain's natural memory process with targeted cues. People dismiss sleep learning because fraudulent versions were aggressively marketed for decades. The backlash was justified, but unfairly extended to the legitimate science. Targeted memory reactivation works because sleep is not passive. During slow-wave sleep, the hippocampus replays recently encoded memories and transfers them to long-term cortical storage. External cues matching the encoding context trigger more frequent and complete replays. The memory gets rehearsed more times and stored more durably. This has been replicated across studies of spatial memory, vocabulary, musical skills, and emotional processing. Sleep was never downtime. It was always processing time. With the right cues delivered at the right moment, you steer that processing toward the memories you most want to keep. The alarm clock was interrupting a study session. Empathy is just a feeling. Empathy is an emotion. It is a soft, subjective experience that varies from person to person. It is purely psychological, unmeasurable, and impossible to pin down with hard science. Then neuroscientists discovered mirror neurons, brain cells, that fire both when you perform an action and when you watch someone else perform the same action. When you see another person in pain, specific neurons in your brain activate as if you were experiencing that pain yourself. Brain scans show that observing someone else's suffering activates the anterior insular and anterior cingulate cortex, the same regions active during your own pain experience. Empathy is not just a feeling. It is a biological mechanism hardwired into brain architecture. The fallacy is the category error. By classifying empathy as just a feeling, we place it in the subjective, unmeasurable category and strip it of scientific standing. But emotions have physical substrates. Fear involves the amygdala. Pleasure involves the nucleus accumbens. Empathy involves mirror neurons and pain processing regions. Calling it just a feeling is like calling a heartbeat just a sensation. The subjective experience exists, but so does the underlying machinery. People diminish empathy because culture traditionally separates reason from emotion and values reason as superior. If empathy is merely emotional, it can be safely deprioritized in favor of logic. This framework conveniently excuses a lack of empathy as rational detachment rather than neurological deficit. But the neuroscience does not support the hierarchy. Mirror neurons are fundamental to social cognition, language development, and learning through imitation. Damage to these systems correlates with reduced social functioning and difficulty understanding others' intentions. Empathy is not weakness, wearing a feelings costume. It is the brain's social operating system, processing the states of every person around you and generating the neural signals that make cooperation and community possible. The feeling is just the user interface. The machinery underneath is as hard as bone.